have someone here by the name of Jerry Roman, who is I would say, a historical figure, not a hysterical figure, but a historical figure that grew up in Cleveland, has seen just about every change there can be within the last many, many years. I'll let him explain it. But here is Jerry Roman, and he is a car idiot forever. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you. Well, the only reason I loved cars when I was a kid is because my family never owned a car. And most people don't believe it, but when I was 18 years old, I had a Schwinn bicycle I drove to high school. And I had a friend pick me up, and I paid him $50 to throw me in the back of his 40 Ford to take me to school. So anyway, that's where I started. But in the late 50s, I worked for an old Hungarian guy that barely spoke English, and he wanted me to come in and work for him doing body work. So I started in there doing body work. Just before that, I worked at Quay Buick working on new cars as a body shop helper. But I always loved cars, even though I couldn't afford one and nobody had one. So I didn't even know how to drive. So a friend of mine took me out in his old Studebaker. I remember on farm country, it was a 6 shift, and taught me how to drive. So many things happened in my life as far as belonging to Custom Kings car clubs and different things. But in the 60s, most of the body work we did was collision work. Ronnie, who's sitting right here, helped me do Corvettes. And before you know it, we were doing shitloads of Corvettes because nobody knew how to glue them back together. So in the 60s, that's what was busy. Then in the 70s, we started doing, in the mid-70s, we started doing customizing on new cars, which we called new car restyling. So we would build a custom car or two in between, but we would do the new car restyling, which was special trunk lids on LTDs, grills, tops, all kinds of weird things. And during the 70s and 80s, I think in the late 70s, 78, we started doing what we call simulated mock tops on cars. And everybody said that's going to die in probably 10 years. Well, it lasted 30 years. So even though we were still doing body work and paint work and building some custom cars in between, we still loved to do candy apple paint jobs. And Ronnie and I would take in brand new Eldorados, strip it in one day, take all the paint, the chrome off, be ready for it. In 3 days, we were painting it pearls or candies or whatever. And people were shipping their cars from Detroit. We even had a car from Alaska that was shipped in because nobody knew how to paint candy apple, other than George Barris and a few people, Dean Jeffries out on the West Coast. So, but that was the good old lacquer days. Now, when you look at the finishes on cars, it's so much easier. You get away with, instead of 25 coats, you get away with 6 coats. And it's much easier to do, but the cost is 20 times higher. But during the late 70s and 80s, we moved to downtown Cleveland, which gave us some good PR because we were near the Plain Dealer up the street. They put us on the front magazine of the Plain Dealer magazine. They put us on the front cover. And so we started doing shows. Our Custom Kings Car Club had our own show in downtown Cleveland at the Arena. That was on Euclid Avenue, the Arena. And then we did a club show. I had a couple car shows out at the Coliseum with Nick Maletti. And he said a car show could never be done there. We did one. In the meantime, we're still running a business, still doing things, still creating, coming up with new ideas. We came up with an idea back in the 70s and that for doing Targa bands on cars. And Ronnie, sitting right here, would actually do patterns, and we'd make Targa bands for cars. Before you know it, we're shipping them all over the country because everybody else wants to do them. So, I mean, it's gone through so many stages, but it always kept us busy. Then we got into doing custom upholstery. I mean, there were so many things we were doing, making fender skirts that look like old cars, put them on new cars, and make them look like they belong. That was another thing that was very popular. We shipped those. But the grill business, in fact, I still have 18 brand new 78 Ford LTD grills in stock.
Yeah, that's a plus.
That's a plus, because we did probably 25 to 3,000 cars for Ford when we did his own package. But being in shows, being in parades was the best thing ever could happen. And I had so many friends around the country in business, but none of them wanted to do retail. They just wanted to do dealer work. So we were one of the few that did both. And we found out that with manufacturing and doing just about everything you can do on a car, it kept us busy in slow times. And as many years we were in business, I think it was total 47 years, wintertime was always a slow time. So in order to get cars to do during Christmas time and not lay people off, we had to go to the dealers and tell them, we're going to be in a new car show. We need 30 cars. We need to do this car in advance. And please give us a Cadillac, a Ford, a Chevy, whatever. Let us dress it up. We're going to pay for the show. You just pay for the customizing. And that's what kept us busy every year. And that's why we did this show since the time they opened. But as of now, when I sold the business after 47 years, I was in it to 2007. The new owner took over in 7, and in 2008, 8.5, he folded. So I ended up with having a business that wasn't totally paid for and a shitload of parts upstairs that were in my warehouse, supposedly. So Ronnie and my crew, I was in Arizona, came there and started emptying it out and selling all my stuff. Selling upholsteries and stands and jacks and spray boots and everything. We finally, after about 3 or 4 months, got rid of everything except for the parts I wanted to keep. And I started out with 7 storage areas of that. Now I got 3 left, which I had to get somebody to work on selling those parts for me. And I still love cars. I still have some of my old cars. Steve, who has my 53 Olds, is restoring that, like in the 50s. Hopefully he's going to buy my 73 Eldorado and keep that so I can drive it and he can own it. And then I still have my chopped Corvette that was sold a few years ago. That was in Pittsburgh. He resold it to somebody in New York. I was hoping it would stay in Cleveland, and I'd like to sell my cars and keep them in the Cleveland atmosphere, so to remind people of me when I'm gone.
With all that history, and you're looking back at it, would you consider yourself a true car idiot?
Yes, I would, for sure.
And does your wife know about all the history, and does she help you with any of these issues with automobiles and collecting?
She helped me because she was with my company for 20 years, and she was an RN. So now...
Well, that's good. If she's an RN, you needed a lot of help.
I did.
You definitely needed to be resuscitated many, many times.
Yes, and brain surgery a few times, too.
Well, you have to get together with Dr. Redline on that one.
And I used to go out with Bernie. That's why I needed brain surgery.
Well, you were attracted to the Corvette, and I think you mentioned a little bit about it because some people, they didn't know how to glue them together, and they were fiberglass cars. But you were known very much in those days for paint jobs. You used to initial them in the glove compartments and things like that. Were you just attracted to the Corvette because people didn't know how to glue them together, or do you still have a true love for that Corvette as your other significant other?
I love doing things that nobody else could do or wanted to do, so I wanted to tackle and learn how to do it and be a perfectionist at it. And everything had to be perfect in our shop. That's why we got the reputation.
Well, you know, when you look back over the last, say, 60 years, you've been in business for over 60 years, right?
Started in 59, so really I'm doing stuff since 59. But before that.
But you've been involved long before that, not within business. But when you look at George Barris and those people, Big Daddy Roth and all these others, they were somewhat of an inspiration, but you were actually an inspiration, well, as a contemporary. You didn't really look at them reading books and popular mechanics and all that stuff and saying that I want to be like George Barris or I want to be like Big Daddy Roth. You were actually their contemporaries.
Yes, I just, I knew they customized cars, and I like customizing too, but really there was no money in it. It was building a reputation, so we'd build one here and one there, take them to shows, but to make a living on customizing only, it was very tough. You had to do production of something where you do 100 or 200 or 300 the same thing, make a part and be able to use it. But once you build one-on-one, that's good if you're doing it for the movies and stuff, but we don't get movies here. We didn't at the time anyway.
In today's world, you're here at the IX Center, Autorama. There's about 100,000 people that are coming through this weekend. You look back at the early Autoramas and things like that, and how they did it down in Cleveland and in the basement of those establishments and in the smaller venues. The automobile customizing, modifications, and things like that is hundreds, if not thousands of times bigger than it is or now than it was before. But do you see anything different now? Do you see a trend?
What I see more of is restoration. People getting older cars and restoring them and not customizing them or not restyling them because they're worth more money if you leave them alone. Just make them look as original as possible. But once you customizing, like my chopped Corvette, it probably, with that engine and everything was in it, and the number that was on that, everything on the car and engine, it probably was worth $130,000 if I had left build it stock. And I couldn't even get $100 grand, and I spent $250 grand doing it. So you got to leave things alone. Certain cars have to be left alone. But there are some people that I see here in the show that have channeled a car, chopped a car. I mean, there's some cool looking stuff, and that's okay. But the young people, in order to get the value out of the car, they have to restore it to perfection. And I would say that's the most important part.
Do you see a 1995 Toyota being worth more stock or customized? I mean, it's it depends. Like you say, it depends on the car.
It depends on the car. I mean, I have a 2003 CTS in Arizona that I customized or restyled both, and it's probably worth $2,500, and I'm getting $7,500 for it because it's customized, because it looks like a newer car. So certain cars, yes. Other cars, no.
I agree with that. Well, you are definitely obsessed with your vehicles.
Yes.
And that's what keeps you youthful.
Correct. Yes. That and young women.
That's good.
And I have a young woman wife.
Well, that's good too. You're not trading them in for new models.
No, I'm not trading them for new models. No.
Well, I think, Jerry Roman, it's really a very special I've known you all these years. I mean,
I was your teacher.
Yes, you were.
On Friday nights and Saturday nights.
Yes.
If you remember that.
Yes, well, when we can remember that, we wake up the next morning if we can remember that.
You couldn't remember.
Well, that goes back a long time ago. That was a disco era, everybody, but we'll probably keep this for the later shows later on in the show. This will just be for the earlier, the midday show.
And this is not the risque show either.
Well, I know I've seen a lot of changes in Cleveland, and it is an honor to know you and to have learned from you with the cars and to look for what they are doing with these automobiles today. It really is very special, and your team was always very special too. You got to have a good team around you.
You sure do. You got to have a good team, and you got to have good people that want to learn how to do things. And that's why I said when Ronnie was there, starting at 13 years old, it was nice to be able to teach somebody that didn't know anything, and he started sweeping the floors just like I did. But before you know it, he's painting a car, and I said, here's the gun. He painted it as good as I could or better. So that was the most important. That was really made me proud because he hung around, he stuck it out. He wanted to be a painter. He learned from me. Then he could do it on his own. And that was great.
Well, that sounds good. Like the younger generation, if you're interested in getting your hands dirty, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of skills that people need nowadays. One question I have for you, in the days of lacquer and nitrocellulose and, the regular, the way you painted and buffed and sanded, a lot of that's changed now. There's different chemicals. A lot of it's EPA related. But do you see, we see cars now with paint jobs that you could never envision. Maybe with a candy apple paint job, but even that compared to these cars now with all these different types of polyesters. Do you like it more now, and as far as what you can do creatively?
It's much easier now. It's much easier. Instead of 25 coats of candy, you put down 5 or 6 and it's done. So you're not spending 15 and 20 hours to put paint on a car. The finishes are harder. They don't crack. They're durable. So no, I'd say I'd rather be a painter today than I was when I was a painter. The materials are definitely much better, except they're 20 times the cost too. So.
And what can you tell the younger generation? Because I know a lot of clubs, a lot of different, not just automobile clubs, but let's just focus on that. What can you tell maybe someone that's in their 20s or teens? Can you give them any advice on maybe a direction if they want to get involved with this kind of hobby?
Well, if you want to get involved, I'd say first try it as a hobby. Find yourself a good job, make lots of money, and then find yourself a car, and maybe you'll have a dad or a son or somebody that wants to help you and restore a car together. And sort of learn how to do things on your own, do as much as you can yourself, but make it a family project. And that would be fun. My kids were too young to do it at the time I did it, but it's nice to have your family around what you're doing, and maybe they'll have a love for it. But keep a car in the family, which I used to do for people, and they said they're building it. They don't care what it costs. They're going to give it to their kids, and they want them to have the fun with it. So I would say making a career out of this business, it's a tough business. I don't think anybody wants to be a body man and painter, but if you do, that's fine. Get yourself a car and do a hobby. Otherwise, just get a good job, go to college, and make good money, and then have money to spend on a wife, children, and a car.
Well, that's good advice. Well, Jerry Roman, a true icon from Cleveland here, no doubt about it. And I'm glad that he was able to spend some time with us today and the audience, explaining and giving us his life history. So, Jerry, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Bernie.
And thank you for coming on our show, Car Idiots Forever. And again, let the audience know that you are a car idiot forever.
I'm a car idiot forever.
And I'm Bernie Goliath, Chief Car Idiot. And I'll see you at CarIdiotsForever.com.